They said Miss Sloane had a habit of wasting her kindness. That was the phrase whispered in the narrow streets of Dry Creek, wasting it, as if kindness were flour in a drought year, something that ought to be measured and guarded, not handed out to those who didn't belong. Sloane Hart was 25 years old when the school board asked her to step down. She stood in the doorway of the one-room schoolhouse, her fingers curled tight around a stack of slates and dog-eared primers, listening as the last of the white children were led away by their parents. Mothers held their sons by the shoulders, fathers by the wrists, pulling them back as though the wooden benches inside might infect them. It had not always been like this. At first, it was only a few Apache children, quiet, barefoot, eyes sharp and wary, standing at the edge of the yard, watching lessons through open windows. Sloane had been the one to wave them in. She had knelt to their height, smiled, offered chalk and paper without asking permission from anyone who believed authority belonged to skin color. Children learn the same way, she had said when questioned, by being given the chance. That had been mistake enough. The real trouble began when white children were made to share benches. When a blond boy learned his letters beside a dark-haired girl whose mother wore buckskin instead of cotton. When laughter crossed lines that adults had spent years carving into stone. Parents complained. Then they threatened. Then they pulled their children from school entirely. "You're teaching them things they shouldn't know," one man had said, his voice sharp as a whip. "You're confusing them," another woman insisted. "You're putting ideas in their heads." Sloane had listened. She always listened. But she did not change. So the board met. Quietly. Without her. The principal, Mr. Caldwell, a stooped man with tired eyes and ink-stained cuffs, had called her into his office at Whiskey. The lamp between them burned low, its glass clouded with years of use. "They're leaving in numbers I can't ignore," he said gently. "I've lost 12 students this month alone." Sloane nodded. Her hands rested neatly in her lap. Children don't stop learning just because adults are afraid. Mr. Caldwell sighed. "No, but schools close when parents stop paying." He had paused then, eyes heavy with regret. "You're a good teacher, Miss Hart. Better than most. But this town isn't ready for what you're trying to do." She had met his gaze, steady and calm. "Then the town will stay exactly as it is." There was nothing more to see after that. The next morning, Sloane packed her belongings. Not much books, a few dresses, chalk wrapped in cloth, and a tin box of hard candies she kept for the children who came to school hungry. She did not announce her leaving. She did not argue. She did not cry. But when she stepped outside for the last time, a small hand tugged at her sleeve. It was Eli, one of the Apache boys. He couldn't have been more than fun. Dirt smudged his cheek, and his shirt hung loose on his thin frame. He held out a folded piece of paper, creased so many times it nearly fell apart. "For you," he said quietly. Inside was a drawing, crooked letters, spelling her name. A sun in one corner, stick figures holding hands beneath it. Sloane knelt in the dust and hugged him before she could stop herself. "I won't forget you," she whispered. As she walked away, she felt the weight of every pair of eyes on her back. Some curious, some relieved, some hard with judgment. They said she was young and foolish, too soft, too ideal. They said teaching Indian children was useless, dangerous, a waste. That word again. Useless. By the time Sloane reached the edge of Dry Creek, the wind had picked up, carrying dust across the road in thin, restless lines. The land stretched wide and unforgiving, sun-bleached and stubborn, like the people who claimed it. She stopped there for a moment, resting her hand on the worn leather strap of her travel bag. The West was full of danger's outlaws, sickness, hunger, drought. Everyone knew that. But Sloane had learned something far more frightening. There was nothing more dangerous then a heart convinced it was righteous. She turned her back on the town and walked on. She did not know where she would build her school. She did not know who would come or how long she would last. All she knew was this: if no one would give her a place where children could be treated equally, she would make one, even if she had to build it from nothing. Sloan Hart learned quickly that the land beyond Dry Creek had its own way of testing people. The road narrowed after the town faded behind her, turning from packed dirt to uneven ground, scattered with stone and scrub. The sun rode high and unforgiving, pressing down on her bonnet and warming the leather strap of her bag until it burned against her palm. She had walked less than 3 miles when the sound came. A sharp crack, wood splintering, then silence. The front wheel of the hired wagon leaned at an angle it had no right to be. One spoke snapped clean through. The horse snorted and stamped, unsettled by the sudden stop. Sloan stared at the damage for a long moment, then let out a breath that was half laugh, half disbelief. "So that's how it's going to be," she murmured. She gathered her skirts, stepped down into the dust, and began unloading what she could carry. Books first, then the tin of candies. The rest would have to wait. That was when she heard the voice. Children's voices, quick, overlapping, drifting on the dry air. She followed the sound past a low rise and found them clustered near a patch of scrubby grass. 4 Apache children, watching over a small herd of goats that had far too much curiosity for their own good. They froze when they saw her. 4 pairs of dark eyes studied her like she might bolt or fight. Sloan stopped where she was and slowly crouched, careful not to startle them. "Well," she said lightly, brushing dust from her skirts, "you're either the bravest goats I've ever seen, or the worst behaved." One of the boys snorted before he could stop himself. She smiled, not wide, not forced, just enough. "I won't tell on them," she added. "I promise." The smallest girl edged closer, her braids uneven, her dress patched at the hem. "You from town?" she asked. "I was," Sloan replied. "I suppose I'm between places now." And she reached into her bag and pulled out the tin, opening it so the sunlight caught the dull shine of hard candy inside. "I have sweets," she said, as if sharing a secret. "But only for those who know good stories." The children exchanged glances. One boy, older than the rest, lifted his chin. "What kind of stories?" "The kind about clever goats," Sloan said without missing a beat, "and children who are smarter than grown men." That did it. They moved closer, careful at first, then eager. She handed out candy one by one, never pushing, never rushing. As they sucked on the sugar, she spun a tale about a goat who outwitted a mountain lion by pretending to be deaf and foolish. They laughed, sharp, bright sounds that cut through the quiet land. She was mid-sentence when a shadow fell across them. "That's enough." The voice was low, firm, used to being obeyed. The children stiffened instantly. Sloan looked up. The man standing a few yards away was Apache, broad-shouldered, his dark hair pulled back at the nape of his neck. Dust clung to his boots and the cuffs of his trousers. His eyes were steady and unreadable, fixed on her as though weighing her worth. "Goats wander if you don't watch them," he said to the children. "You know that." They scrambled to their feet, guilt written plain on their faces. "She wasn't doing anything bad," one of them blurted out. "She gave us candy." The man's gaze sharpened. Sloan stood slowly, brushing her hands together. "I'm sorry," she said evenly. "I didn't mean to interfere." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the broken wagon wheel in the distance, the stack of books at her feet, the way the children hovered close to her without realizing it. "You shouldn't hand things out so easily," he said at last. "People expect something in return." Her smile didn't fade, but it softened. "Children don't," she replied. That earned her a flicker of something surprise, maybe before his expression closed again. "Take the goats home," he told them. "Now." They hesitated, glancing at Sloane. She nodded. "I'll be right here." They left reluctantly, looking back more than once. When they were gone, silence settled between her and the man like a held breath. "I'm Travis," he said finally. "This is my land." "Sloane," she replied. "Thank you for not thinking I was stealing your goats." He almost smiled. "Almost?" "You're not from around here," he said. "No. And you don't look lost." "I'm not," she said honestly. "Just delayed." His eyes flicked to the candies, the books. "You do this everywhere you go." She considered lying, then decided against it. "Yes," she said. "I suppose I do." Travis studied her for a long moment. Too long to be polite. Long enough to make his thoughts clear without words. She was pretty. That much was obvious. Soft-spoken. Clever. The kind of woman who could walk into a place and have people smiling before they knew why. He didn't trust that. "People don't take kindly to strangers who stir things up," he said. "I've noticed," she replied. There was no challenge in her voice, no defensiveness, just truth. He exhaled slowly. "There's a boarding house a quarter-mile east. If that wheel doesn't hold, you won't make it much farther today." Relief flickered across her face before she could hide it. "Thank you." As she gathered her things, he turned to leave. "Travis," she called. He paused. "I don't want anything from you," she said, "or from anyone else. I just want to stay." He looked back at her then, really looked. "I've heard that before," he said quietly. "It never lasts." He walked away before she could answer. Sloane watched him go, the children's laughter still echoing faintly in her ears. She didn't know why his words stayed with her, only that something in his eyes told her he had learned them the hard way. The boarding house sat low and narrow against the land, its paint sun-bleached to a tired gray. It wasn't much, but it had a roof that didn't leak and a door that locked, two things Sloane learned to value quickly. From her small window, she could see the edge of Travis's land stretching out in uneven lines of fence and scrub. In the early mornings, she watched him work quiet, methodical, never wasting a movement. He carried himself like a man used to being alone, as though the land itself were the only companion he trusted. She did not go to him. Not at first. Instead, Sloane unpacked her books. She laid them out carefully on a crate borrowed from the boarding house keeper, smoothing their worn covers as if they were fragile things. Chalk followed. Slates. Pencils sharpened down to nubs. She hung a scrap of canvas between two posts to serve as shade and set a bench she'd bought second-hand where the ground dipped least. It was not a school. Not yet. The first child came without asking. It was the small girl with the uneven braids, the one who had taken candy and listened to goat stories. She hovered at the edge of the clearing, twisting her fingers in her dress. Sloane pretended not to see her at first. She opened a book, turned a page, and began reading aloud in a calm, steady voice. The girl crept closer. By the time Sloane looked up, there were 3 more children standing behind her. That was how it began. They came in ones and twos, sometimes lingering only long enough to hear a story, or trace a letter in the dirt with a stick. Sloane never asked their names unless they offered them, never asked where they were supposed to be. She knew better. By the 3rd day, word had spread, and so had resistance. A boy named Tomas stopped coming. Sloane noticed immediately. He had been bright-eyed and curious, quick to laugh, quicker to ask questions. When he failed to appear for 2 mornings in a row, she waited until the sun climbed high, then packed her bag and walked toward the far edge of the settlement. Tomas's home was small, built close to the earth. His mother stood in the doorway when Sloane approached, her posture stiff, her expression guarded. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Sloane said before the woman could speak. "I just wanted to check on Tomas." The woman's eyes narrowed. "He won't be coming back." "I understand," Sloane replied gently. "May I ask why?" "You're white," the woman said flatly, "and white people take children away." The words landed heavy between them. Sloane swallowed. "I teach reading and numbers. Nothing more." "Nothing starts that way," the woman said, and turned back inside. The door shut. Sloane stood there a moment longer, then spoke softly to the wood. "I'll come back another day," she said, "if you'll allow it." There was no answer. She walked away without anger, without Therese, but something in her chest ached all the same. Travis saw her from across the field. He had been repairing a fence when he noticed her leaving the far settlement, shoulders squared, steps measured. He watched her walk past without looking his way, dust clinging to the hem of her skirt. She didn't look defeated. That troubled him more than if she had. By the end of the week, more children had gathered than Sloane had benches. They sat on the ground, knees drawn up, elbows bumping. Laughter drifted across the land in short bursts, quiet enough not to draw too much attention, loud enough to feel alive. It was the markings that did it. Travis came into the old storage shed one afternoon and stopped short. Charcoal letters covered one wall, uneven, crooked, determined. ABC numbers followed, smudged and bold. There was a goat drawn in the corner, its expression offended. His jaw tightened. He didn't raise his voice. "Who did this?" The children froze. One boy stepped forward, chin lifted in challenge. "We're learning." Travis's gaze flicked to Sloane, who stood a few paces back, hands folded, eyes calm. "You didn't ask," he said. She met his look without flinching. "I didn't think you'd say yes." That honesty caught him off guard. "You don't just take what isn't yours," he said. "I didn't take," she replied. "I borrowed. If you want it back, I'll clean every mark." Silence stretched. Travis looked at the wall again, at the effort in those crooked lines, at the careful spacing line. He turned away without another word. The markings stayed. That night, Sloane found a stack of boards leaning against the shed wall. Dry, straight, cut to size. She said nothing. Neither did he. The rain came 3 days later, sudden and hard. Clouds rolled in fast, darkening the sky until the land seemed to brace itself. Thunder cracked sharp enough to make the children jump. Parents hurried to gather them, voices raised with fear. By dusk, one child was missing, a boy same age as Tomas. He'd been out with its goats when the rain hit, and he hadn't come home. Panic spread quickly. Someone ran to the boarding house, breathless. "Miss Sloane, have you seen him?" She hadn't. But she didn't hesitate. By the time she reached the edge of the fields, Travis was already there, tying a rope around his waist. "We'll split up," he said. "You stay where the ground is higher." "No," she said, voice firm. "I can help." He studied her, really studied her, then nodded once. They moved fast, calling the boy's name between thunderclaps. Rain soaked them through, turning dirt to slick mud beneath their boots. They found him near the ridge, huddled in the mouth of a shallow cave, goats pressed close around him like a living wall. He was crying when Sloane reached him. "I lost them," he sobbed. "They'll be mine." She knelt in the mud and pulled him into her arms, holding him tight despite the rain. "You didn't lose them," she said softly. "You kept them safe." The boy shook, clutching her coat. Travis stood back, watching. When they returned the child to his parents, gratitude broke through fear. The mother who had turned Sloane away days earlier touched her sleeve, hesitant. "Thank you," she said quietly. Sloane nodded. "I told you I'd come back." Later, as the rain eased, Travis walked beside her in silence. "You didn't have to do that," he said finally. "Yes," she replied. "I did." He glanced at her then, something unreadable in his eyes. For the first time, he didn't doubt her staying. The rain left the land changed. Not gentler, just quieter, like a place that had shouted itself hoarse and needed time to breathe again. Puddles settled into the low ground. The air smelled of wet dust and sigh. For a few days, even the wind seemed to move more carefully. The children returned as if nothing had happened. They came with muddy boots and damp hems, hair still curling from the rain, voices bright and unafraid. They dragged crates closer together, argued over chalk, and claimed spots on the ground with the confidence of those who believed the space was theirs. Sloane let them. She learned quickly that children did not need permission so much as presence. If she was there, they came. If she stayed, they stayed. The lessons unfolded not in neat rows, but in a loose circle, with letters traced in the dirt, and sums worked out, using pebbles and beans. Travis watched from a distance. He told himself it was habit. A man learned to watch his land the way he watched the sky quietly, without comment. Still, he found his steps slowing near the shed, his eyes drifting toward the sound of voices that didn't carry fear. One afternoon, he heard laughter sharp and sudden. He paused at the doorway. A boy had drawn a crooked circle on the ground and declared it a river. The others argued about how many steps it took to cross. 5, one insisted. 7, another said. Only if you're slow, a third added. Sloane stood with her hands on her hips, pretending to consider. "I suppose we'll need a bridge." They stared at her. "A bridge?" the boy asked. She picked up 2 boards, laid them across the circle, and gestured. "Carefully," she said. "If you fall in, you'll get wet." But the children lined up, solemn as soldiers, then crossed one by one, arms stretched wide for balance. When one slipped and landed in the dirt, the others laughed, helping him up without cruelty. Travis felt something ease in his chest. He didn't stay to watch the end. That night, Sloane found the shed roof no longer leaked. A patch of fresh wood covered the worst of it, nailed down, clean and tight. She ran her fingers along the edge, smiling to herself. The next morning, she left a tin cup of coffee on the fence rail near Travis's tools. No note, no explanation. He took it, without comment. The children noticed everything. "Why does he fix things if he doesn't like school?" one girl asked Sloane, eyes bright with curiosity. "Maybe he likes learning more than he lets on," Sloane said lightly. Later that same girl marched up to Travis, hands on her hips. "Do you know how to spell your name?" He blinked. "Of course." "Then you should come sit with us," she declared. "You're wasting it." Sloane bit her lip to keep from swelling. Travis cleared his throat. "I have work." "So do we," the girl said firmly, "and we still learn." He walked away, but his steps weren't as sharp as before. Days passed like that, small moments, stacking quietly atop one another. A bench repaired, a bucket filled, a fence post recessed just enough to keep the goats in. The children grew bolder. They began asking questions that had nothing to do with letters or numbers. "Are you married?" one boy asked Sloane one morning. She nearly choked on her coffee. "No." "Why not?" She glanced toward the shed, where Travis stood pretending not to listen. "I suppose I haven't found the right reason." Another child piped up. "Travis isn't married either." "I know," Sloane said, heat creeping into her cheeks. "He should be," the boy decided. "He looks lonely." Travis dropped a board. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the land in gold and rust, Travis approached the edge of the clearing. The children fell silent. "I need the shed tomorrow," he said gruffly. "Just for the morning." Sloane nodded. "Of course." He hesitated, then added, "You can use it again after." Something in his tone, awkward, almost careful, made her smile. "Thank you," she said. He looked away. The turning point came quietly. One of the younger boys struggled with his letters, frustration written plain on his face. He pressed too hard with the chalk, snapped it clean in two, and shoved his slate aside. "I'm stupid," he muttered. Before Sloane could speak, Travis knelt beside him. "Who told you that?" he asked. The boy shrugged. "Everybody." Travis picked up the broken chalk and sapped it again. Clean and even. He handed one piece back. "Then everybody's wrong," he said. "Some things just take longer." The boy stared at him. Sloane did too. From that day on, Travis stopped pretending he wasn't involved. He didn't sit with the children, not exactly, but he lingered. Answered questions. Showed them how to measure boards, how to count fence posts, how to tell when the ski meant trouble. Sloane watched him work with them, saw how his voice softened without losing its strength, how the children listened, not because they were told to, but because they trusted him. One evening, as they packed up the day's lessons, Sloane spoke without thinking. "You're good with them." Travis shrugged. "They listen. They listen because you don't talk down to them." He considered that. "Neither do you." The words settled between them, warm and unexpected. Later, as the children scattered home, one lingered behind, grinning. "Are you two going to stay together?" he asked. Sloane laughed softly. "We already are, in a way." Travis didn't argue. They stood there a moment longer than necessary, the land stretching wide and open around them. For the first time, the space between them didn't feel so large. Trouble did not come all at once. It seeped in quietly, like cold through cracked wood, settling into places no one thought to watch. The first sign was absence. One morning, only half the children came to the clearing. They arrived slower than usual, eyes darting toward the tree line, shoulders drawn tight. A boy slipped into his seat without speaking. A girl kept glancing back toward the path, as though expecting to be called away. Sloane noticed every one of them. She always did. She taught anyway, kept her voice calm, steady, as if nothing had changed. She read aloud, asked questions, praised careful answers. But when the lesson ended, she did not dismiss them right away. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently. The children looked at one another. Finally, a boy spoke. "My father says people in town are angry again." Sloane knelt so she was level with him. "Angry about what?" "About us," he said. "About you." That afternoon, the message arrived more clearly. Two white men rode past the clearing, their horses' hooves kicking dust into the air. They did not stop, but they did not look away either. One of them laughed, low and sharp. "Thought you learned your lesson," he called. "Some folks don't belong everywhere." Sloane stood straight, hands folded calmly in front of her. "I teach children," she said. "That's the problem," the man replied. And they rode on. The children were quiet after that. Travis watched from the edge of the land, jaw set, fists loose at his sides. He had seen this kind of thing before, pressure that pretended to be polite, threats that waited for darkness. That evening, he found Sloane packing. She folded her clothes carefully, laid her books in neat stacks, wrapped them in cloth as she always did. There was no panic in her movements, no rush, only resolve. "You're leaving," Travis said. She did not look up. "I won't be the reason they come after your land." "That's not your choice to make alone," he said. She met his gaze then, eyes bright but steady. "I won't stay if it costs you everything." He stepped closer. "And I won't let them chase you out." A silence stretched between them, thick with things neither had said before. "They'll burn the shed," she said quietly. "Or worse." "They won't," Travis replied, "not without being seen." "And if they are?" "Then they'll answer for it." She studied him, searching his face. "You've already lost so much." His voice dropped. "So have you." The next morning, Travis did something he had avoided for years. He rode into town. He spoke to the sheriff, not with anger, not with pleading, but with facts. He named the men who had ridden past. He described the threats. He made it clear that harm done to his land would not go unnoticed or unanswered. The sheriff listened. Whether from duty or discomfort, Travis did not know. But he listened. Word traveled faster than fire ever could. The children returned the following day, hesitant at first, then bolder. Some parents stood at a distance, arms crossed, watching, not approving, but not stopping them either. One boy tugged at Travis's sleeve. "Are they going to take the school away?" Travis knelt, meeting his eyes. "Not today." That answer was enough. The pressure did not disappear, but it changed. Eyes watched from farther away. Voices lowered. Threats lost their teeth when they could no longer hide behind silence. Sloane unpacked again. She did it slowly, deliberately, as though each book placed back on the table was a small act of defiance. One afternoon, as she taught sums beneath the patched roof, Travis sat nearby, not with the children, but close enough to hear. He listened as she explained patiently, as she corrected gently, as she praised effort, more than perfection. A girl leaned toward him and whispered, "You stayed." He nodded. So did she. As the sun dipped low that evening, they stood by the fence together, watching the children scatter home. "I don't know how long this will last," Sloane said. "Nothing worth keeping lasts without effort," Travis replied. She smiled faintly. "You always speak like you've already lost the argument." He looked at her then, really looked. "I speak like someone who's tired of running." The words settled between them. "I was taught to pick sides," he continued. "White or Apache, loyal or traitor, strong or weak. It left me with nowhere to stand." She understood that more than he knew. "I don't want to be brave," she said softly. "I just don't want to leave anymore." He reached out then, not urgently, not dramatically, and took her hand. "If you stay," he said, voice low, "I stay." She did not answer with words. She squeezed his hand once, firm and sure. That was answer enough. The land did not change overnight. Neither did the town. But something had shifted. The children laughed louder again. Parents lingered longer. The shed stood another day, then another. And Sloane no longer packed at night. She slept knowing that when morning came, she would not face it alone. Spring came quietly, not with celebration or promise, but with small signs that asked to be noticed. New grass pushed through the hard ground. The creek ran a little fuller. The air carried warmth that lingered instead of fleeing at dusk. The school stayed. It did not grow fast. It did not grow loud. But it stayed. Children came with books tucked under their arms and dirt on their boots. Some stayed all day. Some came only when their parents weren't watching. A few brought younger siblings who sat near the edges and listened as if the words themselves were food. Sloane learned to measure success differently. Not by numbers, not by approval. By the way a child lifted their head when they read a sentence without help. By the way laughter came easier. By the way fear no longer arrived first. Travis worked the land harder than ever. The fence lines held. The goats grew fat. Crops took root where they hadn't before. He learned which hills caught frost and which held warmth, which patches needed rest and which needed faith. He did not call it hope, but it was. The town did not soften overnight. Some people still crossed the street rather than pass the school. Others pretended not to see it at all. A few watched from a distance, curiosity warring with old habits. Sloane did not chase them. She had learned that hearts changed best when they weren't cornered. One afternoon, A woman stood at the edge of the clearing, with her hands folded tight at her waist. She did not speak. She only watched as her son worked through a page of sums, his brow furrowed in concentration. When he finished, he looked up, proud. The woman swallowed hard. "Thank you," she said quietly to Sloane before turning away. It was enough. The children made sense of the world faster than the adults. They noticed how Travis always stood close during lessons now, even when there was no trouble. How he listened when Sloane spoke, how she glanced at him without thinking. They noticed how he fixed a bench without being asked. How she saved the last piece of candy for him, setting it aside as though it were obvious. One evening, as the sun dropped low and painted the land in copper and gold, a boy tugged at Sloane's sleeve. "Are you leaving soon?" he asked. She smiled gently. "No." He nodded, satisfied. "Good. Travis would miss you." She laughed softly. "What makes you think that?" The boy shrugged. "He stays when you're here." Later that night, Sloane sat on the steps of the shed, watching the stars appear one by one. Travis joined her, lowering himself beside her with a tired sigh. "You're thinking again," he said. "I always am," she replied. "About leaving." She shook her head. "About staying." He was quiet for a long moment. "I never planned to stay anywhere this long." "Neither did I." The wind moved through the grass, carrying the sound of distant laughter, children lingering longer than they needed to, reluctant to go home. Travis spoke without looking at her. "When you first came here, I thought you wanted something." She smiled at the memory. "I did." He turned then. "What?" "A place that wouldn't send me away." His gaze softened. "I don't know what this becomes," he said carefully, "or what it costs." "I know," she replied. "I don't need to know more." He reached out, not fast, not urgent, and took her hand. It fit there, easy and certain, like it had been waiting. They did not kiss, they did not need to. The weeks that followed folded into one another, like pages in a well-read book. The school gained a roof that no longer leaked. The children learned to measure boards, to read signs, to ask questions without fear. Travis taught them how to work the land. Sloane taught them how to listen to one another. Sometimes parents stayed. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes the town watched. Sometimes it looked away. One afternoon, a child brought a stack of papers tied with twine. "We made something," he announced. They spread them out on the table. Crayon drawings, charcoal sketches, careful letters. There was the school, the goats, the land, and two figures standing side by side, not touching, but close. Sloane felt her throat tighten. "That's us," the boy said proudly. Travis studied the picture, then nodded once. "Looks right." As summer neared, the land settled into itself. The school no longer felt like an intrusion. It felt rooted. One evening, as they locked the shed, Sloane paused. "Do you ever wish things were easier?" she asked. Travis considered the question. "Sometimes. But easy never kept anything worth having." She smiled. "I think I believe that now." They walked together across the quiet land, the last light fading behind them. Sloane had been told she was useless, dangerous, too ideal. She had been told the things she cared about did not matter. But here on a piece of land that had learned to hold its ground, she had built something that stayed. Not because the world had changed, but because she had chosen not to leave. And someone had chosen to stay with her.